now welcome Matt Jeffers to the stage. Please come on up. Matt's the Associate Director for Javelin Group. He's got an interesting story about how he started off life in retail, which I won't steal his thunder on, but I'm sure he'll tell you all about it, and I'm sure you'll enjoy the presentation. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you. I suppose I probably should tell you that story. I should also point out that Anthony mentioned that Javelin Group spends all their time just thinking and advising clients. We do actually have lives outside of work at the same time, but we spend all our working lives helping clients with omni-channel and multi-channel strategy. Bit of background to me and the story Anthony was referencing. I realized a career in retail was for me when I went on supermarket sweep when I was a student and realized, and I won, that's the key point, on there, and decided that retail was going to be a career for me. So I'm an associate director in the strategy practice at Javelin. And before that, I spent quite a bit of time at Tesco, launching Tesco internationally around the world. Both in grocery, but with a predominant focus on non-food. So trying to take the Tesco Direct platform into other countries, but also F&F at the same time. So a bit more information about Javelin, and I guess the context for the presentation. I'm going to just tell you a bit more about the company. We'll then run through our approach and interesting companies that are out there that we have worked with. And some of the stories that we've learned of people going international. But what are the things that you really need to plan for as you start to think about international expansion? It's much more about the what of the strategy. So the how and the go-to-market strategies that people have actually employed will come later on in the morning. So we're about 180 people now in the company. We focus very much on retail and consumer. That is the only thing we do. So whereas other consultancies will be extremely niche or much more broad brush, we only focus on retail. So we do the strategy and organizational side. So that's the area that I work in. We have a team of operations guys who are the people who have run warehouse operations. They've run call centers, etc. 20 years plus experience, a lot of them. We have a technology team who will both build the website for you, but also advise you on the different solutions that would be appropriate for you to put in place. We also have the traditional stores team as well. So looking at, it used to be about how do you expand your store estate. Now it's much more about how do you contract the estate, how do you choose which stores to close, and the repurposing of the store estate into different size stores. We work for now 18 of the top 20 retailers in the UK, and we do that really all over the world as well, the work that we carry out. So I've spent the first 6 months of the year doing a lot of work in Scandinavia, but we work in the Netherlands, Germany, France, China, and the US as well. So we think that there are 6 strategic priorities for UK retailers at the moment, or retailers in general, but clearly there's been fast e-commerce growth in the UK, but no top-line retail growth. So there's been this big shift towards e-commerce over the last few years and increasingly multi-channel. And retailers are looking internationally for growth opportunities. But these are the 6 top priorities, we think. So previously it's been investment in e-commerce and multi-channel. Then moving to invest in own labels. If the top line is not growing, you need to be able to try and repair the bottom line, get the margins that own labels will be able to help you build. It also helps you differentiate from the competition. So in this world where you're competing against Amazon less focus on own brand, what can you do to help differentiate you against them? Redefining the store roles and formats, reshaping the estate that I've mentioned already, consolidating and building scale, and thinking about how the supply chain needs to be repurposed. But what we're here to talk about today is expanding internationally and what's the best way to do that. And we really help clients do this across every aspect of international. So whether it be the strategic planning and which markets you should go into, and that's what I'll focus on today, but it could also be the operational, the merchandising elements, whether it be thinking about multi-channel. If you already have stores in the countries that you're thinking of putting e-commerce into, then how do you tie the two things together? How do you work effectively with franchise partners in the countries, for example? Also thinking about international store expansion and due diligence work as well. So when you look at the amount of revenues that are coming from international, obviously that's been quite a focus over the last few years. The figure is very small on these slides, unfortunately, but about 4 billion in total of sales, 14% of total UK e-commerce revenues coming from international. That is obviously going to grow significantly over the next few years as the UK is increasingly approaching a saturation point, if you like. There's still plenty of growth there, but it's going to slow in terms of the growth rates. Clearly, big opportunities to go international and get up to 28 billion by 2020. A couple of companies that have approached international in different ways. So Amazon, everybody knows about. You probably all have certain feelings towards Amazon if you're running your own e-commerce business. Clearly starting in the US, but quickly rolling out their operating model into different countries with a focus on the UK, Germany, France, and Japan at first. International revenues account for about 43% at the moment. Obviously, that is continuing to increase. Questionable in terms of the profit that they're actually generating from those international countries and reinvesting in both the fulfillment and the technology as time goes on. And obviously, Amazon don't necessarily divulge their international profitability, but the sales growth curve is extremely impressive. ASOS, on the other hand, so focused on expansion from the UK, and again, I'm sure everybody in the room is very aware of ASOS. And I'll talk you through their strategy in a minute, but clearly, just in the last few years, the decision to go international has led to exponential growth. The fact that you can now get your clothes delivered anywhere in the world for free and return them for free has helped them build a hugely successful international business. And a quote there, I think, from Nick saying, when we said we wanted to be truly global, we meant it. So I thought it was worth just spending a bit of time on ASOS's international strategy. This is not to claim that Javelin came up with this, but it's ASOS give a lot of information away on their PLC website. And I think it's a very well communicated strategy, very clear in terms of what they set out to do. So they started off by saying, okay, there's a lot of different markets we can go into around the world. Which are the ones that we want to focus on? Clearly the UK being closest to home, but how can we go into the US, France, and Germany as well? A certain number of tactical markets where there were elements that appealed to them, whether it be similarity in terms of the culture, the seasons were the same, the fashion trends were very similar, and there was already an e-commerce market they could go after. And then they lumped everything else into a rest of the world bucket. They then said, okay, now that we've segmented the market, how do we adopt different marketing tactics or different go-to-market tactics for each of those? So they generally said the way we'll start is make sure we've got the delivery options in place. We'll make sure that everybody in all of these countries can pay for the items they want to buy from us. So let's reduce down the barriers as much as possible. Putting the payment methods in place, so if there were particular things in certain countries, so if you think of Germany and Holland, for example, where the predominant payment method is, or used to be, similar to bank transfer, then they put those in place to try and, again, reduce down the barriers to buying online. Moving into online digital marketing and doing that effectively, focusing on certain countries, using affiliate networks, getting people out in the countries to start doing the marketing for them, but in a cost-effective way. Taking all of the sales proceeds that you get and some of the margin benefits that you get as well from going outside of the EU and reinvesting that back into the cost of delivery, bringing that down now to the free level that you can see today. and also reducing the cost of returns. Then you move into, okay, the next level, how do we push that conversion rate that little bit higher, drive the sales lines, putting in-country return solutions. So they've got it now in the US, they've got it in Australia, they'll have it in China as well before long. Particularly in fashion, hugely important to be able to give people that chance to be able to return the products. Something like 30% of ASOS's sales are actually returned. So the gross sales, taking that down to the net sales. Putting customer care in the local language, something that they've thought about and they've done for some of their tactical markets, and then moving into local language sites. So you need to be able to build up enough volume in the particular market or enough interest to be able to then say it's worth the effort of getting the site translated or of having a team that will actually run the site and merchandise it separately. Moving into then offline marketing, where do we place the marketing in each of the countries to get the most benefit from that? Having a dedicated product range. So typically, ASOS used to say, well, no, we're just going to have the same range for all countries. Recently, they've said that in China, the only way that they can fulfill properly in China is actually to move the product closer to the customer. And so I think around 3,000 lines will start in China at first, and that will no doubt increase. But also giving the in-country teams, once you set them up, the chance to be able to select the product range and to be able to merchandise it in a different way. Creating the mobile language sites and then moving into the full local language, the fashion finder, the marketplace, the full gamut across everywhere. And you can see from the sales numbers they've had that the strategy has worked particularly well for them. The challenge will be, can you keep it going? What are the next countries that you add on top of that as they start to approach saturation in some of these? The UK, in general, has been somewhat slow in terms of the bricks and clicks businesses launching international sites. So the fact that M&S only have 8 localized e-commerce sites, and yet they've got 51 store-based businesses around the world, or 51 countries, is quite surprising in this day and age. Next, again, 40 countries around the world, but only 7 localized sites. And they've interestingly just said that they don't want to move into any more countries with physical stores. They only want to do e-commerce, because then they're operating on a level playing field with other players in the company. It's that much harder to be able to predict how stores will take off. I should apologize for the formatting. Javelin's presentations normally look absolutely immaculate. We had to change the formatting to 4:3 ratio rather than 16:9. It's a poor workman that blames his tools and all that. Anyway, this is just really to introduce the next section. So talking about where should we go next? How do we plan for the countries that we should go into? What should the proposition be? What do we take from the UK and take it out into other countries? If you have stores out there, what's the element of bricks and clicks that we should be taking out, and then how should we implement that? So if you think about it in terms of low risk, low penetration in terms of the sales, you've got a choice with international expansion. You can go with e-commerce only, you can go with stores, or you can go with the mix all across that risk spectrum. And really saying that it's high risk, high penetration for multi-channel is just to say, if you're going to try and do both at the same time, you have that chance of diluting your efforts and taking the attention away from doing one of these well. So e-commerce only. So you get the opportunity to test the market and optimize the proposition that you've got in place. So really learn about what the local customers want from you. It leverages a lot of the assets that you already have in the UK. And allows you to really test out the fact that you've got strong growth of e-commerce across a lot of different countries and capitalize on that demand. Range size, availability can also be maximized online. You're no longer space constrained in the way that you are for the stores. And it's relatively low risk and low cost, at least if you plan in the right way. Not to dwell too much on the other areas, because that's not the focus for today. But thinking about stores only, clearly in lots of emerging markets, it's a very different proposition that you need to put together. If you think about Southeast Asia, where I spend a lot of time with Tesco, I was fascinated by the fact that people want to go out into the stores to benefit from the air conditioning and the fact that it's nice and cool in the stores, and people will spend 4 to 5 hours in a Tesco hypermarket in Malaysia and Thailand. Now, personally, and this is, as an ex-Tesco employee, I wouldn't want to spend much more than about half an hour, and I do most of my shopping online. But you need to think about those local differences that are there, so that you can adapt the proposition accordingly. Clearly, stores give you the benefit of having the in-store feel, the look, the touch and feel, etc. And the capex can be shared between partners. Multi-channel is really a bit of a challenge if you do both at the same time, but that does allow you to do things like click and collect, etc. But you face some of the challenges of dealing with franchise partners. So that's a question that we're being asked at the moment of some of our clients who have rolled out across the world with stores, but used franchising as the route to do that. How do I then launch e-commerce into that country? Who has control over the website? How do I share the sales and the proceeds between each of those? The numbers have disappeared from that slide. Sorry about that, but you can see from the bars, I guess. So the UK is actually approaching, or it is the highest penetrated market for e-commerce sales. I'm not sure how many of you are aware of that. So roughly 10% in, I think it was in 2012, and it's going to go up to 16% relatively soon. So I think that shows you that at a certain point we are going to hit saturation effectively. So still plenty of growth to go after, but it's going to take some time. Looking across all of these different countries, you can see what the opportunity is. So the Western European, Northern European countries, the US, all fairly heavily penetrated, but lots of big countries coming down on the right-hand side. So particularly Russia, China, the BRICS countries in general, relatively low penetration and lots of interest in e-commerce from the West at the moment. This just gives you a general view of the size of e-commerce markets around the world, and clearly that's one of the things that you need to be able to look at. I'm not going to start selling my products necessarily into Bolivia, which has a very small e-commerce market. It doesn't make a huge amount of sense unless just adding one extra country into the delivery options doesn't cost me anything incrementally. So why not open it up to sales into Bolivia? I have nothing against Bolivia, by the way. It's a very nice country. I highly recommend going there for a holiday. Places like China, though, clearly big opportunity with China. And China will be the biggest e-commerce market in the world in a couple of years' time. So it'll go shooting past the US. And that's really where a lot of our clients are saying, how can you help us with China? If they're not there already, they're starting to think about going in. So China is a market that I spent quite a bit of time in with Tesco. We launched a couple of sites on Tmall, which is Taobao's B2C marketplace, effectively. And I thought it was worth sharing with you some sales figures. These are not Tesco's China sales figures, by the way. These are the sales figures from one day in China. It's either called Singles Day, Magic Stick Day, Bear Sticks Day, lots of different names. It's China's Valentine's Day. So 11th of November, so 11/11, hence the reason it's called Magic Stick Day. And this is apparently created by students, and they send, if you're a single student, you send lots of presents to all of your other single friends. That's where it started from. E-commerce companies jumped on the back of this and said, that's a good idea, let's capitalize on this. And the growth on that one particular day has been astronomical. So $3 billion US dollars last year. Tmall, that's on Taobao in total. Tmall had more than 2.1 billion. So these figures are higher than Cyber Monday in the US and Black Friday together. This year, the sales will surpass both of those days put together. So a huge amount of sales go through. 109 stores, 213 million active accounts during that one day. And I think there was something like 80 million mobile devices accessed the site in the first couple of hours, between 7 and 9 a.m. that morning. 105 million orders in total. But as you might expect, that presents some challenges in itself, and this gives you an idea of the level of parcels that go through after Singles Day. Now, no matter which partner you pick in China, they're going to face this problem, and you move from a next day or a 2-day delivery proposition to you'll be pretty lucky if you ever see that parcel. But normally, I think when we went through this, so our site was about 1 month in existence by that point, and it was taking about 10 days to get our products to the customers on a supposedly next day or 2-day proposition. But all of the couriers faced this dilemma, and this was one of the better photos. There were some worse ones. But clearly, I mean, that's just to point out that you need to understand a bit more about the local market when you're thinking about going in there and being aware of things like Magic Stick Day. This just gives you an idea of another bit of analysis that we would suggest doing. So understanding the category dynamics. So looking at the French clothing market and footwear as well. How concentrated is it? What are your chances of being able to go in there and compete effectively against La Redoute, Vente Privée, Trois Suisses, etc. Pretty simple piece of analysis. For us to do at least, we've got access to the market research, and that's something that we would typically build up for clients, a good picture of the concentration level within the markets. Is it dominated by 1 or 2 big players? How do you compete effectively against them? How can you benchmark your proposition, say, against La Redoute? So just a few different factors that I'll talk about in terms of what you need to think about. So population characteristics. So how young is the population? How switched on are they? How much shopping are they doing already online? What's the split between urban and rural, for example? Broadband penetration. So certain markets seem like they would be right to be able to go into because they have a high level of broadband penetration. South Korea, for example, which has, I think, 10 gigabit per second connections to a lot of the homes out there. It's a very switched on nation, but not necessarily that easy to be able to penetrate. The presence of international brands in any particular market, so that not to speak about Nike in particular, but how much work has already been done in that country to introduce customers to international brands? Do you need to do the hard work to be able to help people understand what your brand is and what are the important things about a British brand or an international brand? Government regulations and taxes, a huge challenge and really a big minefield for retailers to have to go through. And particularly, certainly thinking about my ex-colleagues at Tesco in the legal department, they were very scared when we said we wanted to launch F&F clothing out into the EU and out into further countries after that, because they had no idea about what were the regulations that they would need to look at. So if you think of distance selling regulations in the UK, and you've set up your websites in the right way to be able to be fair compared to the DSRs, how does that then change in the other countries? And there is a lot of work going on to try and harmonize that across the EU, but it's going to take a long time, as with a lot of things in the EU, I guess. But things like the amount of time that you've got that you allow people to return items. So if you take it to the extreme, I think there's one EU country that allows 56 days for you to be able to return items. And if the harmonization project is to extend all of that to the extreme, then that will cause UK retailers some challenges to be able to extend that. Taxes, so even if it's something as simple as VAT, one of the big benefits of selling from the UK outside the EU is that you don't necessarily need to levy the VAT. You can pass on those savings to the customers, or you can make the margin benefits yourself and reinvest that in the cost of delivery. But how do you deal with VAT within the UK, within the EU, sorry? So the different levels of VAT, how do you do the registration in each of the different countries if you're not already present in those countries? And then how do you deal with things like duty as you go internationally, and coming up with solutions for that. Looking at levels of disposable income across each of the countries can be a good way to help understand how much money people have available to spend. And again, getting access to a data source that you can actually trust. And this is just obviously one of the different economic measures that you could look at. Logistics, fulfillment, obviously fairly straightforward. Choosing the right partner to help you go out into the countries, whether you use the same partner that you use in the UK to do all of your international delivery, or you pick another company. Choose one that has the right level of experience, can give you the right sort of rates that will make you competitive in the market out there. Payment preferences, so the differences that I mentioned up front, whether it be that countries have bank transfer, if you have cash on delivery. So in China, it used to be that roughly 70 to 80% of sales within China were done as cash on delivery. Obviously, generally speaking, you wouldn't necessarily want to do that. The good news is that level is down to about 20% now. But how do you deal with a customer that would want to be able to pay with cash on delivery? Can you get a logistics partner that can actually do that service for you, and how much does it cost to be able to do that? How do you build it into your e-commerce systems? So the geography, the urban versus rural, and the density of the population. How easy is it to be able to do the deliveries out to customers? So particularly relevant, for example, for the supermarkets. So when we were thinking about rolling Tesco grocery out across Europe and across Asia as well, we were trying to work out what's the relative drop density, and can we actually roll this out across all of the countries that we have, or do we actually say, no, we'll concentrate it on the big cities? So in Thailand and Malaysia, for example, the decision was made to focus only on Bangkok and KL. Clearly, the competitive environment is important to look at, and really trying to understand. The more obscure the market, the harder it is to be able to find out about the competitive environment. But it's still worth doing the digging to find out as much as possible. And smartphone and tablet penetration, clearly, things are shifting that way. In a lot of the countries that represent the big growth opportunities, people are leapfrogging, and they're moving. They're not using desktops at all, and they're moving straight to a smartphone device in particular, or a tablet. So the way that we try to boil all of that down at Javelin, or one of the approaches that we would take, is to build a scorecard effectively. So pick the categories that we would want to focus on, and they're listed on the left-hand side here as an example. This list is by no means exhaustive, and we would adapt this depending on the client, depending on the region that they want to go in. What are the things that we should look at most? So whether it's the online market maturity, complexity of fulfillment, the growth of e-commerce, or the macroeconomy, etc. The important thing is to build these scorecards, and then you can look at across different countries, give a score to each of these. And then it might be that you want to weight these criteria in different ways. So that's certainly the approach that we would take, to say which of these criteria are most important for the international strategy that we have. And that will give you a short list of countries then that you can look at. We did this as part of a white paper that we produced, I think it was last year, to look at international expansion, and try to plot what the ease of entry versus the long-term size of opportunity. So you can see most of the EU countries listed here. Generally speaking, fairly easy to do. Lots of the barriers that you would face, you wouldn't necessarily have to deal with. Some of the other ones then dotted around, and clearly we're saying that Germany and France would be the easiest countries to go to. In fact, I'm sure a lot of you in the room are probably already in Germany and France to a certain extent. Other opportunities, the US. So how easy is it to go into the US? There aren't that many companies that have really cracked that from an international perspective, given the strength of the market that's already in the US. So certain markets that we would say that you should follow through afterwards, relatively easy to be able to do, particularly if you've done the hard work with setting up Germany and France in the first place. But the bigger, longer-term opportunities up in the top left there. So not necessarily the easiest to be able to enter, but the size of the opportunity that you'd be able to get back. So the BRICS countries, Korea and Japan. And the ones at the bottom left leave for later. A different way to be able to think about it is how which countries are most appropriate for stores and most attractive to put stores into versus e-commerce. And again, split across these axes. We came up with the idea that really the US and China were probably the leading strategic multi-channel opportunities. And I think there's two ways to be able to think about that. In the US, multi-channel is similar to the UK, but some of the initiatives are slightly different. So click and collect, for example, is much less popular in the US than it is in the UK. And that's partly driven by America being car culture, more spread out, et cetera. Having a more flexible courier system and infrastructure in place to be able to do deliveries in different ways. China, on the other hand, is great for both. There's a huge amount of potential for sales and ultimately, hopefully, profitability as well. The real challenge in China is that you've got stores on the one hand, e-commerce on the other. Fitting the two together is much harder. You don't see a lot of multi-channel, so one channel supporting the other and the crossover. Part of that is driven by the fact that a lot of expansion has been through franchises and local partners who don't necessarily want to focus on the other channel. So this is just an example of an international strategy that we developed for C&A. So we looked across 13 different markets for them and developed the scorecard. And we did that in conjunction with the client. So it's not that we go away and sit in an ivory tower. We come up with a range of different parameters that we should look at for the client and decide on what's important. And you can see there across in the gray bar the weighting that we put across each of the different areas. That helps C&A understand, okay, what are the first markets that we should go to, and we said there were five priority markets that they should look at. We ran this process together, advise on what are the key considerations that they should have entering into those markets, and these were focused on, generally speaking, within the EU, so C&A's heartland. They're in the process of rolling this out, but they're also looking at replatforming the site as well. So it's dependent to a certain extent on being able to get the technology in place to help them do that. So a few comments to end with before I open myself up to questions. And the pictures here need a little bit of explanation, but this is just to point out that if you don't necessarily launch your brand into some of these countries, then you might find that somebody else already has. So the picture of Marks & Spencer's is a rip-off M&S shop in Russia that they had no idea was operating there and was quickly closed down. This was actually, so one of the directors at Javelin is a former international director at M&S, and he took the picture before he went in to have a conversation with them about shutting it down. The Apple store in the middle is taken in southwestern China, in Yunnan, I think. This was a store where even the employees thought they were working for Apple, and everything in the store looked exactly the same as Apple. And they had not one, not two, but 3 stores in that city that were not real Apple stores. And finally, with Tesco, there was also a store opened up with lots of Tesco products in there. And the staff did not necessarily think that they were working for Tesco, but it was fine. They were working away. The good thing about that was it proved there was a market for Tesco in that city, and so Tesco shut them down and opened up a mall actually in that city quickly after. So what are the big challenges with going international? And obviously later on we'll hear more about the sort of go-to-market strategies and what's worked for people. I think the expectation when you see these markets is that you'll be able to make a ton of money going out, whether that be in sales or in profit terms. And really, the response that I would give is there is a big opportunity there, but you've got to plan in the right way to be able to capitalize on that. Profit might take some time, as we all know with e-commerce business cases. It is a bit challenging to be able to build that. The only way you're going to be able to get the sales at first and the profits later is if you make the investment in the right areas to be able to do that. And often the business plan put together is slightly overambitious to be able to get that initial investment. Marketing in the wrong areas, by which I mean picking either you pick the wrong partner in the local market, or you do everything from the UK, and you think that the same things that work in the UK will work in the local markets, and that unfortunately is just not the case. And I think that proves that you need to be able to go out and pick the right partner, do the research beforehand to make sure that you understand what are the differences in this particular market. Go and speak to other retailers that might be out there, retailers from the UK that have launched in there. The partner selection, particularly in terms of things like fulfillment and understanding what are the complexities within fulfillment, you've got to pick the right people. The brand recognition, so just might seem fairly obvious, but no matter how strong your brand is in the UK, your brand might have no recognition whatsoever in the countries that you go to. So what are the elements of your brand that you want to be able to put across in that country to be able to start building that up? So insufficient senior management time and lack of buy-in. Certainly, I spent probably 18 months convincing people at Tesco that doing cross-border trading with F&F product was worthwhile, but it took a long time and something that the company had never really done before. And so there was a lack of commitment. Is this really going to be a big opportunity? I kept pointing to the nice sales curve at ASOS and saying, well, our product might not be quite the same as what ASOS has, but look at what they've managed to achieve. Why would we not want to invest and go out to these countries? So it's, I guess, just a question of perseverance and making sure you put the argument together in the right way. Export, import requirements, so making sure you understand what are the challenges. So can I sell my product into countries like Brazil, for example, which have lots of tariffs on things like shoes. It's not so easy to sell shoes into Brazil, depending on whether they've got it's leather uppers or rubber soles or whatever it might be. There's quite high tariffs, just to give you a random example. But all of it comes down to, if you plan in the right way, then international could be a huge success for you. And obviously, it would be remiss of me to say that Javelin can come in and help you with the planning process, do some of the analysis for you. And I'd be happy to move on now and take any questions you might have. Final thing is just to say our international white paper is available for download on our website, so please take a look at it. I have 5 minutes, couple of minutes to take some questions now, if you have any. I must have answered all the questions straight away. Sorry, could you just wait for the microphone?
So my question is about product selection. How much your customers are looking at the very sort of small intricacies in the cultural differences and how they can affect coloring, shapes, etc. of the products that they decide to roll out?
Yeah. I think probably it depends at what stage you are. So if you're thinking about launching into different countries and they're relatively similar to the UK. So if you're launching from the UK into the EU, for example, where there are some differences in the fashion trends and the cuts that people would want or the quality of the materials, you can still relatively easily launch what you have already, see how it works, get the feedback, and then that feeds into the next season's clothing and starting to alter. When you go further afield, clearly into Asia, for example, or if you're selling into the southern hemisphere when it's winter time up here, there's not much point trying to sell heavy winter jackets to Australians, that type of thing. So it's a bit of trial and error, looking at what other retailers are doing in the market at the time to understand, what are the seasonal differences. Ultimately, where you end up after having some experience and trialing it out is probably altering the range slightly. But you're not, if it's sizes, for example, the cost of doing that is only going to be backed up if you have the demand there. So it's a bit of a chicken and egg.
Very quickly, what I'm asking is, I've heard this amazing story that I think Lacoste rolled out green hats for guys in China, which culturally green hats were worn by the guys that were cheated by their wives. So the simple thing, like,
Yeah, so things like that, and the yellow and red shirts in Thailand is another good example to show political allegiance. So being aware of all of those things, but the chances are, for things like that, it's edge cases, and you won't necessarily realize until it happens. But trying to be able to react as quickly as possible, so pulling those green hats out of the stores as quickly as you can. Maybe there's a market there for them to do that. It's selling those hats, but with style.
You mentioned the international expansion of Tesco earlier on, and the fact there was food and non-food, and you were doing non-food. How and why did you split them apart, and what were the differences in strategy between those two different parts of the business?
So I guess the first answer to that of why they're split apart is that Tesco and the other grocers, generally speaking, would think about non-food or general merchandise and grocery being completely different customer journeys. And so from an online perspective, if you're doing your groceries, you're literally replicating your shop in store. So I want to be able to browse through the groceries, pick as quickly as I possibly can, and not spend too much time. There isn't a huge amount of inspiration. I don't know if you shop online for groceries in the UK, but the important point is not to get across product details and imagery, etc. It's having a site that works very quickly, and fundamentally a proposition that works for you in terms of the delivery. So how much does it cost? Is it a 1-hour delivery slot? Do they actually deliver on time when they say they're going to, etc. Whereas non-food is much more about inspiration and trying to provide the information there. Obviously, there's distressed purchases, but you need to be able to provide the information to the customer to help them do the journey. So grocery optimized to have millions of customers on the site at the same time, millions of add to basket events all going on at the same time. It's got to be quick. Tesco Direct, much more about providing the inspiration. So same strategy taken for international expansion as well. And grocery, it was a question of not many of Tesco's international markets actually had grocery home shopping there. So we could afford to put in a relatively simple proposition in place, very much pared back from what they have in the UK, give something customers that they didn't have before. When it's going for international, you need to give them something more, because generally speaking, there will be general merchandise players in each of those markets. So in Korea, for example, we decided to go out and acquire a business. That was the best way to launch into the market and actually buy a marketplace player, and not worry about putting our own stock out there, but just learn about the market by being able to work with sellers. A little bit more of an entrepreneurial approach. China, we also went on the marketplace route. And part of that was because we were waiting for replatforming in the UK of Tesco Direct onto the ATG platform, which took a little bit longer than expected. I can see some smiles around the room, so I won't mention any more. But the challenge was really to get the platform in the UK sorted, get the business model sorted from a non-food perspective. Once that was sorted, then we could roll it out internationally, which I think you will see more of in the next couple of years.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to do a little bit of stage management now for the next session. So we're going to get a panel up here next. So, but I'd like to welcome up Gabriel Hayes,